Premier Rides started in 1994 out of Baltimore, Maryland, introducing their first 3 coasters in 1996, and over the past 28 years, they've introduced 40 coasters around the world, mostly using magnetic launches. These are famous for being short but sweet, super smooth and flipping riders upside down. Today, let's go around the world and find out which one's the tallest, fastest, longest, best paced, and rank them up based on prime ride time. These are the coasters of Premier Rides, by the numbers. First, I'm not going to go over all 40. Some of these are clones and will be grouped together. I also will only consider active coasters, but at the end, I will talk about a few notable defunct Premier coasters and where they would rank on this list. That leaves me with 14 unique active models. If you're new to the By the Numbers series, prime ride time starts when the train picks up speed off the lift, and ends when it hits the final brakes. For launch coasters, which is pretty much every coaster on here, the clock starts when the launch starts. Mid-course brake runs are left in, but if it slows the train down too much, it'll extend the ride time but hurt the pacing. With the help of Google Maps, and in one coaster's case, the Pythagorean theorem, I was able to take out the lift, station, and brakes from the overall length, so the number on your screen will not match the number on RCDB. In 14th place with 28 seconds is Racing Coaster at Trans Studio Bandung in Indonesia. This is basically a poor man's Mr. Freeze, launching riders out the station at 62.1 miles an hour. That's 8 miles an hour behind Mr. Freeze, but still good for 4th place. Then it goes into a top hat, but this one's smaller and doesn't have the vertical entry and exit. Then turns around and up a vertical spike. That's standing 164.1 feet tall. That's 3rd place. Then it does the whole course backwards, so you take that 902 feet of track and double it, so 1,804 feet lands it at 10th place. Because it finishes the course so fast, it's 3rd place in pacing, covering 64.4 feet per second. Tied for 12th place at 36 seconds is Runaway Mountain at Six Flags Over Texas. It's not their only chain lift coaster, but it's the only one on this list. They have some defunct ones, including their water coasters like Buzzsaw Falls at Silver Dollar City. This was their first coaster to open, being entirely indoors. Not officially a family coaster, but right on the border. This stands 65 feet tall, even though it doesn't have a main drop. That's 11th place. It just winds its way down to the bottom, maxing out at 40 miles an hour. That's a 3-way tie for last, just over 1,200 feet of track, second to last. And even though it ends with low to the ground intense elements, its pacing doesn't stack up to most of these launch coasters. 3rd to last at 33.6 feet per second. Tied for 12th place at 36 seconds is Deep Space at Imagica in India. Another indoor coaster, this one's a lot more extreme than Runaway Mountain. It's not even 5 miles an hour faster. That very gradual launch getting up to 44.7. That's 11th place. Doesn't have a main drop, but the highest point is 52.5 feet off the ground, 12th place. And even though this has 2 inversions, it covers the least amount of track of any Premier Rides coaster. 1,175 feet, 35 feet behind Runaway Mountain. Because of its slow speed and short track, its pacing isn't great, 32.6 feet per second and second to last. This does have a dark ride section before the launch, but I'm not including that in the prime ride time. In 11th place with 39 seconds is Mr. Freeze at Six Flags Over Texas in St. Louis. These are clones. They keep turning the train forward and backward, but that doesn't matter. The stats stay the same. The first thing you notice is that huge top hat and back spike. That stands 218 feet tall and ranks first among active Premier coasters. Granted, it doesn't go all the way up that spike, and you only reach the max point if you're in the front or the back. It all depends if you're going forward or backward. It launches out at 70 miles an hour, that's tied for second, ripping through its top hat, big overbank and spike. Just like Racing Coaster, making its way through the course twice, so you double its 1,300 feet to 2,600 feet, that ranks at 4th place. If you watch it or ride it, you know this has great pacing, only slowing down to go up that spike. A set of LAMs on there to boost the train up higher, and that stall keeps it out of 1st place, 66.7 feet per second. Tied for 9th place with 42 seconds is Epic Coaster at Doha Quest in Qatar. This uses a multi-pass launch, so that makes the track length hard to measure, but it's listed with 1,837 feet of track. And when you add in the extra track on the swing launch, and then take away the brake run, station, and track leading up to the launch, they just about cancel each other out. So at 1,837 feet, it's near the middle in 8th place. This is an indoor coaster but has a huge back spike on that swing launch, rising up 186 feet in 2nd place behind Mr. Freeze. Despite that, its top speed isn't that impressive, 56.5 miles an hour and right in the middle in 7th. So despite its slower the ground course, it doesn't have enough speed to have great pacing. It's 8th place at 43.7 feet per second. Tied for 9th place at 42 seconds is the Skyrocket 2 model. There are 10 of these currently operating. Some have 2 trains and some have 3, but we're going to use one set of stats for all of them. Just like Epic Coaster, this has a swing launch, but unlike Epic Coaster, it doesn't have any extra track to take out, so I had to calculate the track it covers, and I came up with 1,255. That adds almost 400 feet to what's listed and ranks 3rd to last. That last launch hits 62 miles an hour, that's 5th place, twists up to its 150 foot peak, 6th place, goes into that slow roll, hits a trim and dives off the top, into a non-inverting loop, and it's over. Because of that swing launch, the train stalling out and changing directions, and that slow roll at the top, its pacing is dead last at 29.9 feet per second. In 8th place with 43 seconds is Revenge of the Mummy at 3 Universal parks. You'll find this in Hollywood, Orlando, and Singapore. And based on what I've seen, Orlando and Singapore are very similar, and Hollywood is different. Still, the ride time is about the same. The Orlando-Singapore models are about 300 feet longer, but a lot of that track is used for a dark ride and not prime ride track. I used the Hollywood version for this video. I estimate about 1,506 feet of actual ride track. That's 11th. Being indoors and launch is not very tall, 44.4 feet and second to last, and it's tied for last at 40 miles an hour, covering track at 35 feet per second, 11th place. Not very impressive stat-wise, but you can understand why. This does pack a punch, but that's only a small part of the overall ride experience. In 7th place with 44 seconds is Full Throttle at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Here we have another multi-pass launch, but that comes midway through the ride. That also comes with a mid-course stop. I said I leave mid-course brakes in, but in this case, when it stops you on purpose and launches you backwards, I took that out and that takes 6 seconds off the ride time, adding 400 feet to the length. So when you take out the final brake run and turn back to the station, it has just under 2,400 feet of track, and that's good for 5th place. Taking out those 6 seconds helps the pacing also, finishing 4th at 54.4 feet per second. Its max speed is 70 miles an hour, tied with Mr. Freeze for second, but it doesn't hit that on the first launch, it hits that on its last launch, getting the train up and over its 164 foot peak, 4th place, diving off that huge loop into the final brakes. In 6th place with 46 seconds is Alpen Fury at Canada's Wonderland. The one future coaster on this list. We only have the animations to go by, but in my experience, these are pretty accurate. This has a launch to get it to the mountain, and then a main launch to get up to 71.5 miles an hour. That's 1st place. Blast it out of the mountain into a big top hat, twisting down at 154.2 feet, 5th place, and then heads into an out and back layout packed with 9 inversions, tying the North American record, covering 3,281 feet of track, which ranks 2nd. This might change once we get the official POV, but as of now, Alpen Fury has the best pacing of all active Premier coasters, 71.3 feet per second, almost 5 feet better than Mr. Freeze. In 5th place with 47 seconds is Skyrocket at Kennywood. This starts with a rolling launch, getting the train up to 50 miles an hour, that's 10th. Up and over a 95 foot top hat, that's right in the middle in 7th. And before it dives down that vertical drop, it hits a very harsh trim, trying to make that drop less insane. It also has a mid-course brake run, but that doesn't seem to hit that hard. That's not responsible for its bottom half pacing. 9th place at 39 feet per second, that second half running pretty slow. It's got a nice layout, but it's not that long. 9th place at 1,832 feet, only 5 feet behind Epic Coaster. In 4th place with 48 seconds is the Spaghetti Bowl coasters. There are 5 of these, starting with the 2 Flight of Fear coasters at King's Dominion and King's Island, the 2 outdoor versions added in 1999, Joker's Jinx at Six Flags America and Poltergeist at Fiesta Texas. Also, Crazy Cobra at China's Discoveryland. These start with a 60-mile-an-hour launch, that's 6. Rise to the top with a Cobra roll, this standing 78.8 feet off the ground, that's 9th, even though it doesn't have a main drop. These have an amazing 2,366 feet of prime ride track, all of it intertwined, 6th place on the list, and this is all about head choppers and making its way through its 4 inversions. Its pacing feels very inconsistent. It starts high and winds down, dodging all that track and those supports, so it feels like there's some dead spots. It does finish with a head of steam. It really has a strong finale into that final corkscrew. In the end, its pacing is pretty good, 6th place at 49.3 feet per second. In 3rd place with 51 seconds is Backlot Stunt Coaster at King's Island, King's Dominion, and Canada's Wonderland. The final Paramount Park Coaster editions. These are family-style launch coasters that pack a punch. Its launch only gets up to 40 miles an hour, tied for last, but you feel those positive G's as you wind up 45 feet, dropping down 31.2 feet, that's last place, and you wind around some theming before you hit a show section. I would stop the clock here if the train actually stops. This is where you see a helicopter shooting at you and you see a fireball, but if the effects are off, like in my Canada's Wonderland POV, it just rolls right through. This has 1,842 feet of prime ride track, right in the middle in 7th place, and its pacing is alright despite its low speed, 10th place at 36.1 feet per second. In 2nd place with 57 seconds is Icebreaker at SeaWorld Orlando. This also starts with a swing launch, and in this case, RCDB tells us how much track has actually traveled. It's listed at 1900 feet, but it travels 2,750, this having a long launch track and back spike. That puts it all the way up at 3rd place. That final launch gets it up to 52 miles an hour, 9th place, up and over an 80-foot top hat. But that's not the max height of Icebreaker. That comes on the back spike, or what they call the Junior Scorpion Tail at 100 degrees and 93 feet. That's good for 8th place. After the top hat, it stays pretty low to the ground, offering twists and turns and airtime moments, never going upside down, covering track at 48.2 feet per second, 7th place. In 1st place with 70 seconds is West Coast Racers at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This is a Mobius loop, so you get to ride both tracks, each one finishing in exactly 35 seconds, and there you have your 70 seconds of ride time. This starts with a launch, but I don't think that's where you hit the top speed. I think it gets up to 55 miles an hour on the 2nd launch, the one that propels you into the interlocking corkscrews, that being good for 8th place. This does not have a real drop, its max height being on those corkscrews at 67 feet, that's 10th, but it clears the field by almost 500 feet, this being one of the rare Premier Rides coasters that has a full complete layout. It also has good pacing, never really slowing down from the first launch to the final brakes. 53.7 feet per second in 5th place, less than a foot per second behind its Premier Rides parkmate, Full Throttle. Before I get into the defunct coasters I want to talk about, I want to look at all these coasters and grab their average rank, just to see who is the true overall by the numbers champ. When I take all 5 categories and average them out, Alpen Fury comes out on top with an average rank of 3, but take that with a grain of salt since we're basing that off animations. Mr. Freeze isn't far behind, Full Throttle and West Coast Racers right there, and Icebreaker finishing top 5. You can see Racing Coaster was last in ride time, but it's right in the middle in the overall list. And once you get past Skyrocket, you can see the smaller models like Backlot Stunt Coaster, the Skyrocket 2s, and the list ends with the indoor coasters, the Mummies, Runaway Mountain, and Deep Space being in last place. I want to talk about 4 defunct models, starting with the 2 sides of Batman and Robin the Chiller at Six Flags Great Adventure. Let's start with Batman. 32 seconds would have put this second to last. This launched at 65 miles an hour, that would have been 4th. Rising into a top hat 139 feet off the ground, that would be 7th. But it did have those spikes standing 200 feet. But RCDB lists the max drop at 139 feet, and I'm guessing that's a top hat. This had 1,137 feet of track, but it went through twice. So at 2,274 feet, it would have been 7th place. And it blazes through that course at 71.1 feet per second, just barely behind Alpen Fury for 1st place. Now for the Robin side, basically the same thing, except for a Cobra roll instead of a top hat, taking 3 extra seconds to cover and would have also been second to last. That Cobra roll was 104.9 feet tall, putting this in 7th place, about 200 feet longer than the Batman side, 5th place, and its pacing is slightly worse. Still, would have been 2nd place on the main list. One of Premier's weirdest coasters was Roundabout, a Ferris wheel coaster. This had a basic layout of swooping turns, but that Ferris wheel lift is something we've only seen once and never again. This operated at Hard Rock Park for 2 years until the park shut down. After leaving the Ferris wheel lift, it only offers 27 seconds of ride time, 1 second behind Racing Coaster for last place. At 50 feet tall, it would have been 3rd to last, 40.5 miles an hour would have been 12th, and 960 feet of track would have easily been last, the only coaster under 1,100 feet. As for pacing, not bad, 11th place and just barely ahead of the Mummy coasters. Last one, Speed the Ride at NASCAR Cafe. Known as Vegas's best coaster, I can vouch for that. I used to marathon this thing, and at 38 seconds, it would only be 12th on the list. It was a shuttle coaster, launching out at 45 miles an hour into a turn and a loop, and then a second launch, getting the train up to 70 miles an hour. That's tied for second with Mr. Freeze and Full Throttle. It went up a 224-foot spike. No coaster is taller. It beats Mr. Freeze by 6 feet, but both of them don't reach the top, and how high you go depends on where you sit. At 2,730 feet of track covered, it's 4th place, only 20 feet behind Icebreaker, and that pacing would have been number 1, topping Alpen Fury by a half foot per second. That's a wrap on the world's active Premier Rides coasters, by the numbers. Let me know if anything here surprised you, or confirmed something you already knew. I was most surprised by the pacing on those Spaghetti Bowl coasters. I always figured they sacrifice good pacing to have a cool setting, dipping and twisting around itself, trying not to cut your head off. But there it is in 6th place at 49.3 feet per second. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you're new here and want to see more like this, please give me a sub. I have a playlist with more by the numbers videos. Also, check out my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.